This is a 3D printed desert eagle, and today I'm going to be hand painting it with the Damascus Camo from Call of Duty. But before we start, I need to fix a few parts of the print. There's some spots here that are just a little bit too rough, and to do that I first use some Bondo spot putty. I just spread it around the problem areas, and usually I use a little bit more than I need just so I can sand it down as flat as possible. And once that dries, I do exactly that and sand it down. I use a medium grit sandpaper, and I completely forgot to take the video of it. But after that, I spray it with a sandable filler primer. Again, this is just to fill in any little imperfections, and we will then sand it again. After that, I do a black base coat, and I forgot to record that too, but it's not important because now we're inside at my setup, and I noticed something a little strange. One of the little fins on the side decided to just break off, and that's not good. So let's fix that really quick. I use my favorite glue, which is called Super Weld by JB Weld. And it has this little UV light on the top of it that when you shine it on the glue, it instantly hardens it, which is perfect for stuff like this. Once that's fixed, it's time to get the painting. And I start with 3 colors: blue, green, and purple metallic. I start with the blue one all over the piece because metallics don't really cover all that well, and it helps to just have a base coat of the paint already on the surface to build upon. But be sure to let this dry at least mostly, because otherwise when you put the new ones on, it's gonna wet it and you're gonna get these weird spots all over it where the paint is essentially just moving around instead of curing. So once that's mostly dry, we start to add the other colors. And you really just kind of want to use this by feel. For this piece, I had an idea of what I wanted, which is like essentially stripes that bleed into each other a lot. So it's a smooth gradient. Ultimately, you just want the paint to do the work here. I do really light brush strokes and just kind of let it do its thing. This part's super therapeutic for me. The next part of the paint job is the most tedious, and it's the red lines. When I'm doing this, I'm really just going with the flow. The first time I did it was on a huge piece, which was a Car 98, and there I did kind of draw out a general idea of how I wanted to do it, but I've done enough of these topographic designs that I kind of have a good idea of what looks best, and that is really just making sure things are not the same anywhere. So for Damascus, I use differences in the thickness of the lines as well as the lines themselves. So like when you're doing an outside line, then an inside and an inside, don't make those perfectly exactly the same. And as you get smaller and smaller, change up the layout a little bit. While I was doing this during my live stream, somebody asked me, do you have a name for your gulag rock? And together as a community, we decided on Dwayne, because get it? Getting up and getting the label maker and putting a label on the rock is a perfect example of my ADHD. It's a big problem, but we're not going to talk about that. But now that all of the red lines are laid down, it's time to touch up some of the areas that don't have that design with black. This is mainly the grip and just some small pieces throughout the piece. And then on top of that, we do some blue lines in a topographic design as well. Some of them, it's really just like a line or two, but it does really help with contrasting the piece, and I like the way it turned out. Now, after this is done, I kind of figured out that the red was lacking a little bit of depth, so I add in some highlights to most of the red lines, and I just use a slightly lighter red than the one that was on the base. And this is kind of a pain in the ass, but it was super worth it because I think it looks great. Then I let that dry overnight, and then I seal the whole thing in a couple of different varnishes. Blue gets a gloss coat, which just helps really bring out all those colors, and then the black part gets a matte finish because it's the grip and stuff like that. I thought it, the contrast of the two would look pretty good, and I like it. But doing the varnish in that stage also gives us a perfect surface to put our finishing touches down. And that starts with dry brushing, which we use some gilding wax, brown paint, black paint, and gray paint. I kind of use this sparingly and just accentuate all of the edges on it, and then I add a little bit of weathering here and there. Then I top it all off with a black wash. This helps just add a little bit more contrast in those deep line areas, and I just love the overall look it gives to these designs. At the end of it all, we are left with this. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell or whatever, and don't forget to like the video, and we will see you guys in the next one.